David, you. There was nothing neutral about what happened to me.
Yeah.
Like, yes, justice has to happen. So you're just saying I should work on my own reactions all the time while these people get away with murder? You.
Yeah, that's the only way to get free. 35 years old, I was at the height of my powers. I was, making lots of money and in demand as an actor. But that was really the beginning of the end of my acting career. But I think they thought I was going a little bit crazy. And of course I wondered, maybe I am, maybe they're right. I lost control, like is essentially what happened, which I think is what you have to do in order to change. And, this is why, people say you can only change once you hit rock bottom. I don't know if I hit exactly a rock bottom, but I definitely lost control of my life. The belief is if I show the world this part of me, if they really see who I am, if they really see how much rage I have, or how much, weird sexual fantasies, whatever we feel shame about, if they see it, I'm going to be annihilated. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be excluded, And the exact opposite thing happens. And that in that moment, you can watch somebody, they get rewired. They're almost in shock. They're looking around. They can't believe what's happening. They thought they were going to be shamed, but in fact, people are like, yes.
Hello, everybody. Quick reminder before we get started to please subscribe to my podcast, give me a good rating, give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to help support this podcast, please become a member of my Patreon. That's patreon.com/Mark Vicente. That is how this podcast is made possible. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to David Sutcliffe. David is a former actor who was very famous on the Gilmore Girls, amongst other things. And he now does some very cool somatic therapy. Enjoy this wonderful conversation. Thank you again for taking the time to talk with me. I really do appreciate it.
Of course.
I know you're running around doing all kinds of things. I think my audience, who are very much involved in like pop culture, probably know about you. I have a bunch of people that probably don't know about you. But would you mind just sharing your journey of how you got to who you are now, whoever that is?
Sure. Well, most people know me as an actor from Gilmore Girls, which has become, this classic show. So that's, I was an actor for a long time, started doing theater in college and just kept pursuing it, eventually moved to LA. I'm originally from Toronto and had some success and was enjoying it. But, typical story, you get what you want and you have this feeling of dissatisfaction, and that was confusing for me. And I had a number of relationship fails where I started to see that there was some unconscious pattern that I was running, and then I pursued therapy. I'd always been interested in therapy and psychology. I mean, I started in my mid-20s, but I hit a crisis point, and somebody recommended this core energetics. It was a somatic psychotherapy, and I started working with a man in Toronto in my early 30s. And I'd done a number of different types of therapy, traditional psychology, counseling. I did some Gestalt therapy, which was really interesting, but there was something about the core energetics that just lit me up. The fact that you were working with the body, it was less about dialogue and conversation, and I could actually get into the feeling, which I had an intuitive sense that that's what needed to happen. I had feelings locked inside me. I couldn't get to them. And that feeling them was going to be cathartic and healing. And this was the avenue for that. And then I went up to a week-long workshop at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California, with a woman named Anne Bradney. I'd been told that she was the master. And she lived up to that billing. And I completely got my mind blown. Not only what happened for me personally, but also what I witnessed. And at the end of the workshop, I had this overwhelming impulse, which was I want to make a documentary about this work, which I ended up doing. And I want to know what she knows, and I want to be able to do what she does. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know that that was going to lead to a career change, because at the time I was 35 years old. I was at the height of my powers. I was, making lots of money and in demand as an actor. But that was really the beginning of the end of my acting career. I ended up joining her program 2 years later, and it was just just to do it personally. I wasn't thinking that I was gonna make it a career, but over time, that's where my interest was, and the acting became less exciting for me. I mean, television is, when you're young and you're just trying to make it, and all of a sudden you're on a TV show, it's very, very exciting. But then you realize that you're really just a cog in a wheel, and you're working essentially at a factory. I mean, that's what studios in Hollywood are. They're factories. And you have a particular job. It's a well-paying, high-status job, but nevertheless, you're part of some bigger system. And I felt the depersonalization of that, and I became disillusioned with it. And I was also getting older, and I knew that, the older you get, the harder it is to get work. And so, over time, I just started doing my own workshops at first, just mostly for fun, just to experiment, just to take what I'd learned and apply it and see what happened. And then people started coming up to me almost like they were intuiting my conflict. And they said, I think this is what you're supposed to be doing, man. And I resisted that for a long time because, of course, my whole identity was wrapped up in being an actor. That's where I was making my money. And you do have a lot of status. I mean, being... not that I was super famous, but I was famous enough that I knew what it felt like. And, it's really gratifying to the ego. And it's like you're living some dream, some fantasy that you have as a child. And to give all that up and to pursue this weird therapy was difficult, especially when my representation in Los Angeles, I think they were supportive because, they have to be, but I think they thought I was going a little bit crazy. And of course I wondered, maybe I am, maybe they're right. Now, a number of years later, I feel like I'm finally, I've answered the call, and I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel very passionate about it. I'm just very happy with my life. Finally.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Just, I have so many questions for you, but just one thing I wanted to let you know. I think I shot Lauren Graham's last feature before Gilmore Girls went into production, I think.
What was
Because I shot a movie with her. It was not very good. It ended up being called Romantic Maritz.
Mm-hmm.
It was her and Casper Van Dien and
wow.
Doc from Back to the Future. Doc,
Oh, yeah,
please help me.
Christopher
Lloyd.
something. Lloyd, yeah.
Yeah, I shot that right before Gilmore Girls started. Okay. I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts. I'm fascinated at your story because a number of reasons, but also because I think in my life I've had this push and pull between, immersing myself in the industry and getting lost, and then like, fuck it, I got to get out. I need some time away, going to the mountains and going wherever, and then being like, yeah, but I want to make movies, so then I go back. And people said to me often, like, you should be a psychologist. I just want to make movies. I don't want to be a psychologist. Like, how can I make movies and put them together? Which is like when I made the film, What the Bleep Do We Know? That was sort of my attempt to kind of to put them both together. But I was thinking about, you mentioned at one point that you were, this is in a podcast I heard, that you were depressed. And I was thinking about Jim Carrey's line, depression is your body saying, I don't want to be this character anymore.
Mm.
And I thought that was so interesting. And I was just wondering, what was the depression for you back then?
I think that's exactly right. I realized at a certain point that I was playing a character, and it was informed by my history, my trauma, my experiences as a child. In some sense, the strategy that I developed to survive my childhood, which was primarily just to please my mother, I was now playing that out as an actor and making good money from it, going on these television shows that were sort of female centric and playing the nice guy, the sensitive guy. And there was something about that. It was easy for me. And there was something gratifying, obviously, because I was working. But I was also, I was an athlete and I was a hockey player. And I played on a team in Los Angeles that was all cops. It was a cop team, the LA Bullets. And I'm Canadian and I take hockey pretty seriously. And I was like an animal on the ice. And these guys would watch my show and be like, what is going on? Like, that's not who you are. Like, we know you. We've seen you play hockey. Who is that guy? And I felt the fakeness. I felt the pretension. I mean, it was an aspect of me, certainly, but there was some other part of myself, my aggression, my masculinity, my assertion that I think I was really ashamed to show. And it created this, internal conflict. But I didn't know how to get out of it exactly. And I think I felt a lot of, shame maybe about these other aspects of me. And so that was, I think a lot of people go through that experience. Like you start to feel that you're not entirely authentic. Like you're living in the mask, in the identity self. And this other part of you wants to come through, but you don't know exactly how to access it. And of course, there's an unconscious part of you that is terrified to bring it out because it's repressed for a reason. And so that creates a bind. And I certainly lived in that bind. And I think when you're in that bind, it can manifest as depression, or sadness or dissatisfaction, or it can move into addiction, something. And I definitely went through all of those things: resentment, anger, frustration. And it was, I lost control, like is essentially what happened, which I think is what you have to do in order to change. And, this is why, people say you can only change once you hit rock bottom. I don't know if I hit exactly a rock bottom, but I definitely lost control of my life. And, and when it happened, there's a couple of things that happened that really indicated to me that I'd lost control. I felt relieved, weirdly, even though things were out of control. I felt a relief because it was like the container had been broken, the illusion had been shattered, and there was the possibility that it could be something different. In some way, I was free. Now, I didn't know how to get from there to where I wanted to go. I didn't even know where I wanted to go, but I knew that something had cracked. And then, to go back to my first story, that's right around the time that I discovered this work. And then it was like, oh, there's a place that I can go and sort this out. There's a space, there's room, there's techniques, there's a philosophy that creates a container for me to explore everything that's inside me and bring it out and discover who I really am.
That's very cool. And I was thinking about, so there's the authentic you, and then there's this character you've been playing. And I realize as you're speaking, it's not just that you're playing a character in isolation, you're connected to all these people. There's this network of the inauthentic you, which is big and sizable. Did you have this tug of war, or was it just a simple, like, this is what I'm doing?
No, it took me years to officially quit acting. I actually quit 3 times. There's 3 different conversations where I called up my management and said, like, I'm done, I'm retired, like, don't send me any more auditions. And they'd be like, sure, yeah, we understand. And then, 6 weeks later, like, well, this thing came up. You're kind of perfect for it. I understand you're retired, but just take a look at it. And then I'd be pulled back in. And that happened on 3 separate occasions until I finally let go. But yes, when you're performing for people, that's how you learn to be in connection. That's all you know.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
if you give up that, idealized self-image, there's a part of you that's like, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose this connection. I'm going to lose how I relate to people. Are they going to reject me?
Hmm.
Am I going to be alone? And that's what happened with the child. It's like we had to be something for our parents, for the world, in order to stay connected and in favor with them. That becomes default. That becomes part of our identity, and then we take that out into the world and we apply that everywhere. We don't know that we're doing it. And then, for me, it's like, yeah, I felt the inauthenticity of my relationships. I felt this intense dissatisfaction. And I don't, fortunately, I don't know, the resolve or the passion to, and the willingness. I think if the thing that I'm most proud of myself, or that I feel like is my best qualities, I'm completely willing to live in the unknown. I mean,
Hmm.
you have to as an actor,
Hmm.
right? And again, that's
Hmm.
probably connected to my childhood, where there was a lot of chaos and uncertainty. So I got used to it. And then when you're an actor, you never know where your next job is coming from. And so I've learned to tolerate being in the unknown and trusting, that things are going to work out. So I had an intuition, and I trusted it. And but it was hard. It was painful. I doubted it all along. And but this is what it is, right? I mean,
Hmm.
most of us know, who've really gone on this kind of journey. Like, that process
Hmm.
is difficult, it's painful, it's scary, and people are going to judge you. I got told that I was crazy. People didn't understand what I was doing. I lost a lot of, ultimately lost a lot of friendships, was demonized. People thought I was in a cult, all kinds of things. And some of these things I gleaned, and other things I'd heard later were said behind my back, which was, a very painful betrayal.
Yeah, but I gotta say, I have a lot of respect for your choice and what you've done because I understand, I can imagine the amount of, I guess, part of it is ego gratification, part of it is, building that whole life and then just saying I want something different. I mean, it's pretty amazing, I gotta say. It's very cool.
Well, that's what, it's funny. That's why people come to me now. Most of my
Mm.
clients come to me because they've heard about my story, they've read about my story, and they say, I want to do that. I'm in something that I'm not happy with. And I don't even know what it is that I want to do, but I want out of this into something else. And so
Mm.
I've become, I guess, a role model for people in that way. And yeah, but thank you. Yeah, it's
It's admirable.
scary. It
It
was
really
scary
is.
though.
Yes, no, I'm absolutely certain. There was something that you said, not now, but in something I heard. You talked about that as an actor, you couldn't really feel your feelings, when I first heard it, I was like, well, that's just weird. How could you not feel your feelings? You're having feelings. I wanted to just ask you about that. Like, what do you meant exactly?
Well, I knew that there were feelings inside me that I was having a hard time accessing.
Mm.
Obviously, right? When you get the script, and whether it's an audition or a scene in a show or a movie that you're doing, you understand the emotional content of it. And there were certain scenes that I struggled to really go there. I think scenes around, ultimately is around vulnerability, to really let
Mm.
myself be vulnerable, to let people see my fear, my pain, my helplessness, but also my rage. I think I had a lot of anger, and I was really scared to show it. So anytime, some emotions I could really connect with, but there were places where I could feel that it was false, that it was inauthentic, and it was fine. It's like, okay, I'm indicating the emotion, but it's not embodied. I'm not in it. And, I know the difference. I know when I'm dissolved into a scene and I'm completely present, and it just flows all the way through. And I know when there's a little glitch and something happens and I can't quite get there, and then it becomes performative. And that's not a good feeling. it's almost humiliating because everybody's watching you, and you know that this is going to be on TV, and maybe you do a couple of more takes, but how many takes can you do, right? If you can't get there, eventually they take what they can and they move on. And so that indicated to me that there was parts of myself that I wasn't able to access, and the only place I was able to access them was through this work. I was terrified to feel. My idealized self-image was a person who had it together, who was contained, successful, disciplined, and intelligent, all of that. But really underneath, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of pain I was disassociated from. And there was a lot of anger and bitterness and resentment. And I was completely disassociated from all of it.
God, I want to talk about repression. Because I think this is something you said. I wrote this down. I think this is you. It's through the heart of darkness that we can get to the love and light. I think that's you.
Well, I think a lot of people
And
have said that, but I've said
a lot
that
of people
many
have said
times.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
But, because I think a lot about, spiritual bypassing and everybody trying to get to the love and light and taking the shortcut. And then what you end up with, I think, is, to use your word, you end up with being this non-embodied person. Like you can't embody the love or the light.
That's right.
Like it's thin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thin. That's a great word. Yeah, that was the core energetics work. They have a framework: higher self, lower self, mask. And so mask, we've been talking about this: the identity self, the adapted self, the idealized self-image, and the higher self. I think we all know, right? It's just our love, our gifts when we're in flow. You might call it the divine self, the God self. But the lower self is something that I think people have a harder time talking about or accessing. I mean, Jung talks about it in terms of the shadow, and I really like what he says about it and how he wrote about it and the frame that he gives it. But core energetics, they have a slightly different way of looking at it, and it's really the lower self, as they see it, is a kind of, it's a defense. It's a way that we keep ourselves separate from not just our pain, but also our love. That we've all been wounded in different ways. And when we get hurt, especially if it's traumatic or it's a repeated thing that happens to us in our childhood, we have to cut off. And so we make a decision that we're never going to again engage in any kind of behavior that might elicit a response from the environment that would cause me this pain. And that decision sounds something like, I'm never going to be vulnerable again. I'm never going to need. I'm never going to show you who I really am. I'm never going to open my heart, right? And these statements, these I won't or I never statements are really at the heart of the lower self. And if you feel into those statements, like I'm never going to give it to you, I'm never going to open my heart, there's a kind of aggression that's attached to it. And this was all the child had to hold on to at a time when they were vulnerable and helpless. They were powerless. And so if I can, at least internally, hold on to something like I'm never, I won't, you can feel that there's something to hold on to. And there's also a kind of punishment in it, right? There's an intention to separate, an intention to hurt. I want to hurt you the way that you hurt me. That's really at the heart of the lower self, and what you might say that's the definition of cruelty, right? Which happens in relationships all the time, right? It's unconscious, but it's like we feel hurt by something our partner did, and then there's an unconscious part of us, instead of feeling our pain and being vulnerable and acknowledging, hey, what you said to me really hurt, we usually do something to try to hurt them in the way that we felt that we got hurt. And that's really at the heart of it. And taking ownership of the part of us that is capable of that, capable of cruelty, capable of separation, has an intention to hurt, is challenging because we can feel a lot of shame about those parts of us because, of course, it is shamed. Be good. Right. And particularly in the kind of, I would say the new age, spiritual bypassing, they'll talk about it, right? It's a concept, but to really embody it, to really feel like, no, there's a part of me, it's a killer. And there's a part of me that if you hurt me, I'm going to fuck you up and I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm going to feel righteous about it. And I'm going to rationalize it. And it makes me feel powerful. And in that place, it's good. And that's a pretty intense energy. What I've learned is that taking ownership of that and really knowing yourself there, like really knowing how dark you can be. If you go there, it will take you, of course, to your pain, because that's what it's protecting. And if you're willing to feel the pain that's underneath it, the hurt, right? And you really let it move through your body and you liberate whatever that is, suddenly like the channel of love opens up and then you feel this connection to everything and everyone and you feel the true nature of who you really are. And so, yes, going all the way into your darkness in a way, obviously, that's, contained and conscious, and being willing to access and really feel the place where you were devastated, that will take you to the light, to your love every time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting as you're speaking, I was thinking back to when rage was my bedfellow, my best friend, like in boarding school.
Yeah.
Like I went to boarding school when I was like 6. And my parents, bless their soul, just thought, well, the headmaster said, just leave him and drive away. So that's what they did, which was a huge trauma. And I had all these feelings I couldn't deal with, but the one I really loved was rage.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was also in this very, very strict religious school where I had to be a gentleman. They called you sir, even as a child. So I had to control all that rage as well. And I was terrified of the rage for years. Like terrified. What if I let it out? And I think a lot about, people that are so scared of their feelings, which I really do understand. And then what's so interesting, and I think you had this experience with core energetics, is like when you have an opportunity in your life to actually feel it and allow it to be there, mm-hmm. without judging it. At first, it is terrifying. This is how I felt. At first, it's terrifying. But if you can just, this is my experience, and you've done this with many people, I'm sure, but if you can just sit there and go like I'm just having these feelings. I'm not doing anything to anybody. I'm just having the feeling.
That's right.
Something really cool happens, like you said, which for me ended with just bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
Well,
there it is. You're
right.
It took you to your pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a defense.
And I had so much of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of pain, there's something I want to ask you, because I've listened to a bunch of your Instagram stories as well. I've been kind of stalking you from afar. Not in a weird way. I'm learning shit. My audience is comprised, not all of my audience, but some of my audience is comprised of people that have been through hell. They're in a lot of pain. A lot of them are people that have been in abusive relationships. A bunch of people that have left, high control groups and cults and things like that. And they feel like they were a victim of something. And then, they hear people say, oh, you shouldn't embrace victimhood. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk to you about the difference, as you see it, between actually, yes, you were a victim of something, versus like that becoming your entire identity. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, you nailed it, right? That's what it is. We were all victims, but it's whether or not you choose to identify with that. And there's a lot of seduction in identifying with it, particularly in the culture right now. That's as far as I'm concerned.
I wanted to ask you about that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, culture is all about identity consciousness, but it's really about power. Because if I'm a victim, right, I now have power, right? It's a way that it's narcissism, right? It's a way that I'm special. And so I can get away with things that I wouldn't normally be able to get away with because I'm quote unquote a victim, or I'm marginalized in some way. And, I understand the impulse, and it happens, in the work that I do, whether it's a workshop or one-on-one therapy. You have to validate someone's experience, right? Like, because especially if something happened to them when they were a child, They were a victim. They were young. They were helpless. They were vulnerable. There was nothing they could do. There was no other way they could get out. They were defenseless. And so in that place, we all are victims. And generally, there's a lot of rage there, right? There's a lot of rage at the oppression that we faced, or the hurt, or the cruelty that we experienced. Like, just like you talked about, like, I'm just going to drop you off at 6 years old and see you later. Like, what the fuck? Like, rage is an appropriate response to that happening to you. So what I try to do with people is, you have to validate their feelings, right? You have to say, I understand why you'd feel that way, and give them space to feel the judgment, to feel the rage, to feel the resentment, right? To feel the lower self, and to feel their desire to inflict punishment, to get revenge, all of that. And you want to make that as conscious as you can, but you don't want to keep them there. You don't, if they stay stuck there, that's a problem. And I think that's what happens. Like, in the last, 15 years, we've started to talk and understand trauma, right? And things that happen to us and are causing us to act out in particular kind of ways. And so people are using that as a way to validate their bad behavior, to validate their aggression, to validate the part of them that wants to actually control, and which makes sense, because if you got hurt in a place when you were powerless, you want to take back your power, and you can rationalize it. Because of your pain, well, I can do it at all costs, and it's righteous, and don't try to tell me otherwise, right? But what they're missing, what they're avoiding, what they don't want to confront or feel is, this happened to you. You can't change it. It was wrong on one level of reality, but on another level, on the deepest spiritual level, the event was neutral. It just happened. And can you come to terms with that? That this is a thing that just happened to you, and feel the pain and the madness and the terror of it. And it's only in the willingness to do that that you can make yourself whole. I mean, self-responsibility is the only path to freedom. As long as you're a victim, as long as you're blaming somebody else for your circumstance, right? Your pain. You essentially are a slave to that person, because the demand is, you have to be different. You have to do something different. You have to make amends. You have to give us reparations so that I can finally be free. But that's an illusion. If I give you reparations so that you can be free, I still own you. Mm-hmm. And that is a kind of a deep, it's a hard thing to confront, because in a way we like, well, justice. We want justice. And there's something about that I think we can all understand. But if you really go deep, there's no justice.
So I'm going to channel some of the people I know.
Yeah.
Who will say, David, fuck you. There was nothing neutral about what happened to me. Yeah. Like, yes, justice has to happen. And let me just continue my
Yeah.
And so you're just saying I should work on my own fucking reactions all the time while these people get away with murder? Fuck you.
Yeah, that's the only way to get free. I understand the impulse, but where is the salvation there? Like, you want to punish, you want to destroy, you want to make the world right somehow, and are you not just repeating the cycle in some way?
But I think that conceptualizing that stuff, not just conceptualizing, feeling what you're saying,
yeah,
to me could only come after some time. I had to process
absolutely.
Shit.
Absolutely. No, as I said, it's like, so of course, a lot of people hearing this who it's going to be offensive to them. And I understand that. Because it is offensive from that place. And I felt that way. And so yes, the feelings have to be, you have to make space for all of it. As I said, you have to make space for the desire to punish, to hurt, to get revenge, the desire for justice. Like that energy has to be expressed and acknowledged and validated in order for the person to feel safe enough to really feel the pain of the event and move on from it. And so it's a thing that happens with clients where you're always kind of negotiating. Like, when is the moment that I can begin to encourage acceptance and self-responsibility? You cannot do it too soon because they'll defend against it. And so
Yep.
it's a delicate balance. And maybe culturally, we do need to work this out, and maybe we are working out. Like, I don't think the awareness or the conversations around whether it's, race or gender and the injustice and the oppression that people have faced, I don't think we should just throw that out. It's obviously people are having a lot of feelings about it. The issue is when we're stuck there and we're identified with it, you can never, it will never resolve itself.
Yeah, it's funny. I was having I had this conversation with Africa Brooke on a podcast, and then she had me on, and then I did another podcast episode because I was talking about like reparations and stuff, And I was thinking like, so if my ancestors were assholes, how far back do we have to go? Like, how many generations do we have to go to try to, smite them and hate them? Like, and what if at a certain point, 10 generations ago, they were victimized? Because like,
yeah,
my people, South Africans, were put in concentration camps by the British.
Yeah.
So like, do we go that far back? So, but then we're going to go after the British. It just gets crazy.
Yeah, no, it gets crazy. And so I think the only way this is what it is. I mean, here's the thing, Mark, it's like, it's very hard to accept life on its own terms. And I think I've just recently, I don't even know if I'm fully accepting of it. There's still parts of me that are resisting life, or it's like, I want it to be something other than what it is. But if you just look at history, and chart it and look at what's going on in the world right now. I mean, human beings are savage. We're violent. We're cruel. There is a quest for power and a willingness to do anything to achieve that power. And we want it to be something other than what it is. We want it to change. We can see that it's not fair. We can see that these people are lying to us, that we've been gaslit. Mm-hmm. And this is the way it's always been. And so you have to assume that there's a function to it, that it's built into the system, right? And it's necessary. And there's a great book by Howard Bloom called The Lucifer Principle. It really had an impact on me. And the question he asks is, what is the evolutionary purpose of evil? Because evil exists. I mean, you can define it all kinds of ways, but he gave his definition, which is a reasonable definition, and then went on to show that evil has an evolutionary purpose, that we need evil. Mm-hmm. And and he goes through history and shows all the things, and this led to that, which led to that, which led to, expansion and growth and a higher degree of consciousness. So can you look at the evil in the world and say, yes, thank you? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Because it's inside you. Like, the evil you see outside of you is also inside you. So are you willing to say yes to the evil externally and to the evil inside you? And I think there's a kind of a peace and acceptance that comes from that, but it can only come once you've really, as I said earlier, once you're really willing to face the pain.
Yeah. So this is so interesting. Two things I want to tell you quickly. The one thing is, in my case, because, my cult leader's now in prison, he never confessed to anything. So I never got any kind of closure.
Yeah.
And so it was then, just finishing a project where I interview, narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths, all self-confessed, who tell me everything.
Yeah.
And it's been great in some ways because I'm now learning about the archetype that I was mystified about. And I have learned so much from people that call themselves evil and objectively they're evil. Mm-hmm. They want to destroy people. They get pleasure out of hurting people. It feels good to them. I've
Yes.
learned so much. Um, there was something you said, like, you look at the evil. I'm going to channel some people I know again.
Yeah.
You look at the evil out there and say, well, that's in you. And they say, that's not fucking in me. Like, I don't have to have it to recognize it objectively that that's evil. What are you saying? That I'm a rapist, pedophile, yada. I want to,
Uh-huh.
here's why I want to ask the question.
Yeah.
If I'm in a very deep state, deep state, I guess you
Mm-hmm.
could call it consciousness, whatever. I experience the neutrality of things that just are.
Yes.
And there's a place I get to. There is no judge. It's just what is. Like, I can insist that reality should be different, but here it fucking is in all its fucking technicolor glory. When I'm not in that place and I sort of connect with this very thought I have, I'm like, I'm not fucking that. That's not me. What the fuck are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Help me
Well,
understand that from that place.
yeah. Well, that's why are you not that? Like why the rejection of it? Why the
Okay,
separation? Why?
let's give you an example. Like, I've
Yeah.
talked to people that have done things that I couldn't do that. Even in my most murderous, like, I've imagined killing people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've definitely
Yeah.
imagined it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way I did it was pretty
Mm-hmm.
clean.
Mm-hmm.
There was no torturing, like, fuck. There's none
Uh-huh.
of that shit, because I'm like, it's just, hey, you know what? It's not in me. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I can write about it. I can
Right.
make a movie about it, but my nervous system just goes, nah, no, can't do it.
Right. And that's fair. I think the people who are actually perpetrating the deepest, evil in society are disassociated. They're psychopaths. They're madmen and mad women. But the impulse is human.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the impulse is also, I think what I'm getting at is that it's also lives inside us. And maybe it's not expressed as overtly as killing and torturing somebody, but I do this all the time. My wife does or says something that hurts my feelings. I I don't even really register it. I just feel a kind of annoyance, and then I withdraw. And I don't really say anything, but I just withdraw. And if I really feel into the intention, I'm withdrawing to punish her. I want her to feel hurt, but I'm not going to tell her exactly what it is that I'm doing. I'm just going to be like, no, I'm fine. So now she's confused. And essentially, what am I doing? I'm torturing her. I'm torturing her. And so the impulse is in all of us, I think, in different ways. And the example that I gave it because most people can relate to that in some way. And so I'm not physically hurting her, but the impulse to inflict punishment and harm. And I actually feel like on some level there is a satisfaction in it. Like, this is my lower self. It's righteous because, hey, she hurt me. So, and I feel powerful. I'm back in control. And listen, it's easy for me to talk about. I've done a lot of work. I've gone there, and I understand this is like confronting. And when I'm giving workshops, this is exactly what happens. People, are like, wait. Are you telling me that I could have been a Nazi? And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm telling you. That if you were 18 years old in 1938 Nazi Germany, it's probable that you would have been a Nazi and you would have done horrific things. Or if you go to war, right? And you don't know what you might do when that instinct, that impulse wakes up inside you, or what you might do if somebody comes into your home and takes what's yours or harms your family. Like, we are capable of dark things. And so the reason that I talk about this and continue to try to challenge people there is because it's like, if you know yourself there and if you're willing to take ownership of it, again, not an easy thing to do, you're much less likely to act out on it in subtle ways, right? In these unconscious ways. And if you're willing to take ownership of it, that's the path to a deeper level of vulnerability, which is oh, I notice I have an impulse to hurt my wife, to withdraw, and it's like, oh, I'm doing this thing again. That's an indication that I must have been hurt by something she did. And maybe if I go to her in a place of vulnerability and say, hey, you said this thing or you did this thing and I was really hurt, and I'm not making her bad or wrong. I'm actually just taking responsibility for the way that it impacted me and my feelings. There's a much greater chance that we can come back into connection, come back into harmony, and then grow from that experience. And so it's to me, it's like understanding the part of us that's evil. It's life affirming.
Yes. So I want to go back to what you said, because when you
Yeah.
first said the thing about your wife, I was thinking, well, no, the reason I withdraw, I just want to self comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, is that all? And then I was thinking, no, because I imagine her trying to figure out what's going on, because I want her to know that I'm hurt. And
Yes,
then there's the wiser part of me goes, well, Mark, if that was true, you would just tell her that you're hurt.
that's right.
If that was true, so
Yeah.
you're lying. Yeah. So, and the other thing I was thinking is, I think you're right about embracing what we're capable of, because so, in my war, us whistleblowers in the war against the cult, I had a lot of rage, and it was all about justice. Put these motherfuckers away, and I embraced how angry I was and how capable I could be of violence, because I played out scenarios in my mind, um, and of course didn't do them, because in the end, justice prevailed. Not that I
Mm-hmm.
would have done it but what I noticed is that I was less afraid of the violence after that. And I had been afraid of the violence for so long. I had a shit therapist when I was in my 20s who said to me, I noticed that you have a lot of violence in you, but the whole framing of it was, that's bad.
Yeah.
There was never like, let's get in there and see what it's about. Let's embrace it and see what's going on. It was just like, that's bad. But I've noticed that as I've embraced that I am capable of those things, I do feel a whole lot better about myself. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the interesting thing, and I think you were alluding to this, I feel more capable of loving,
That's right.
having gone there, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
interesting to me.
Well, if you think of human beings as energetic entities, right? We're just energy, right? And when that energy is flowing, and we've all had that experience of really, being in the flow, feeling fully alive, connected. Um, there's a lot of ways to describe what that is, but one of the ways is like love. Like I'm in love with the world. I'm in love with everything. I'm in love with myself. Like everything is okay, and there's this greater intelligence that gets activated. But trauma causes us to repress and hold back aspects of our energy, right? And part of that is the defense, the lower self, the place where we got hurt, as I talked about earlier. We want to get revenge. We want to pay back. We have this rage, and when that rage is repressed, it's hard to be in flow. It's hard
Mm.
to actually be in our love. And so that's really at the core of the work that I do. It's like, we come together in rooms, and, we have these different techniques and, and things that we do, to give people permission to get that part of them out, to have it be expressed, and to go all the way to see what's actually there. And so that energy is liberated, right? And if that energy is liberated, it's no longer in service of the defense, no longer in service of protection. It now can be used for love, or for growth, or for expansion, and for life affirming things. And so it makes sense that once you got in touch with your violence, which is in all of us, right? And you gave it permission, maybe you didn't shame it, right? You're like, this is a part of me. I know it. I'm conscious of it. I accept it. As I have no shame about it. And then we're much less likely to act out on that in overt or covert ways. I mean, the shame
Mm.
spiral is essentially like, if I feel bad about an aspect of myself and I'm identified with that, what inevitably happens is I'm going to act out on this thing that I'm ashamed of to confirm the story that this part of me is bad. Now, maybe you don't
Mm-hmm.
act out that violence explicitly, but that's the cycle that we get into. And so to get up in front of a room full of people, I mean, this happens all the time in my workshops, and people begin to express their not just their rage, Mark, their unconscious negative intention. As I
Mm.
said earlier, the desire to hurt, right? The desire to separate. And what happens is if somebody really goes there authentically, the whole room spontaneously stands up. Why
Mm.
are they standing up? Like, why is there like suddenly, because energy's been liberated. There's more
Mm.
space, there's more room, and they're drawn and they're attracted to it, right? Now it's being
Mm.
expressed in a way that's intentional and in a
Mm.
container that's safe and an agreed upon methodology. We've all agreed to this. But that shifts something inside you, because it's like the belief is, if I show the world this part of me, if they really see who I am, if they really see how much rage I have, or how much, weird sexual fantasies, whatever we feel shame about, if they see it, I'm going to be annihilated. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be excluded. And the exact opposite thing happens. And that in that moment, you can watch somebody, they get rewired. They're almost in shock. They're looking around. They can't believe what's happening. They thought they were going to be shamed, but in fact, people are like, yes, welcome that part of you. It gives more life, and now they have access to more of themselves. They're more authentic, they're more real, and because they're more authentic and they're more real, because that part of them isn't shamed uh, or unexpressed, they're now safer because you can
Yes.
feel them more. If you can't feel somebody, if you can't feel
Mm.
them, you know what I mean? It's like it's hard to feel
Mm.
safe around them. It's hard to relax around them. Or if they're in denial about the people that I'm most suspicious of, it's like I'm all love and light. I'm all love and light.
Oh
I'm like,
yes.
get the
Oh
fuck
yes.
away from me, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I don't, I
That's
don't have negative thoughts. I don't know. I don't identify with that. I'm like that's, and we see it over and over. We see
yeah.
and over and over. Those
Yeah.
people do incredible harm.
Yeah. So I didn't realize until now, but that's what. So that kind of archetype feels toxic to me because intuitively you know that there's a bunch of shit underneath,
Yeah.
and it's been festering, and now it occurs to me, it's because of the level of dissociation and repression that's going on, which you can feel,
Yeah.
and there's a mismatch between the way they're behaving. But it's
Yeah.
true, they feel dangerous to me because I don't know
Yes.
what they're gonna do. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's their defense, right? It's a way that they learn to survive. So there's like, yes, like stay the fuck away from me. And if somebody comes into my office or comes into my workshop and they have that, I'm thinking, okay, I wonder what happened to them that caused them to adapt in this way. It must not feel safe for them. It must not have felt safe for them to express any negativity. And they were forced to conform to this belief system. So there's something innocent in it. But usually these people, when you really talk to them, they have a lot of dysfunction in their life. Things aren't working. The relationships are they're not living up to their own expectations, or they're painful, or they're being betrayed, or they're being seduced, like something's happening. And because they're not in touch with their aggression, they're not in touch with their violence, right? Or their rage. Well, how the fuck are you going to have boundaries? How are you going to live in a world where there's bad people? There are objectively bad people who want to do you harm, right? How are you going to live in a world if you don't have access to that part of you? You're not going to love and light your way out of this. You're not Jesus. I mean, and you're probably not willing to be, nailed to the cross for peace. That's not, it's a great ideal, But
Mm,
most of
mm-hmm,
us are
mm-hmm,
not that. So we have to have
mm-hmm,
access to our aggression to actually live on this planet. And it's good.
mm-hmm,
It's good to have boundaries. It's good to be able to say no. It's good if somebody comes into your home and wants to do harm to your family, that you can whack them in the knees with a fucking baseball bat and put them down. You better have access to that aspect of yourself. And you better see it as good, because it is,
mm,
when
mm.
it's executed in a way that's correct, or the appropriate circumstances, let's say.
Right, right. I want to shift to something to your work with men, and this is of particular interest to me because it's okay. So I grew up with a number of different fathers. One was particularly abusive, so I was raised a lot by women who basically said all the time, "Well, men are assholes, men are shit." So like I inherited that program. I'm shit. And then I was in South Africa, and white people are assholes. So like I'm white and I'm a man, so I'm complete shit.
Wow.
And so it took me a long time to figure out, to want to embrace the idea of masculinity, because I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of judgment about it. And I've recognized that I've never said this publicly before, but I want to share it with you, because when I did my when Africa Brooke had me on her podcast, we talked afterwards when we weren't recording, and I talked about like I'm feeling really shit about the amount of hatred men are getting societally right now. And she said to me, "Well, why don't you talk about it?" Because she's all about, let's not do self censorship. And I said, "I'm too afraid to speak. I'm too afraid to say it
Mm-hmm.
because I'll get destroyed." And she goes, "I understand." And I've been thinking recently, like I'm getting too tired to be afraid, but I'm seeing a real issue, and I'm seeing that there's a certain wounding that I feel, because a lot of what I've done and what I do is I am wanting to protect women against people that are doing really horrific things, and a bunch of the projects I'm doing right now are very much about that. It's not that I'm not wanting to protect men; it's just that
Yes.
a lot of the victims are women, and I feel a tremendous soft spot for what they've been through, and so I want to, help them have justice. And then at the same time, societally, more in America than other countries. I don't experience that. I live in Portugal. I don't experience that in Portugal. But in
Mm.
America, it's like, men are shit. You're straight, you're shit.
Mm-hmm.
You're white, you're shit. It's like you're just a piece of shit constantly. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? Where's the place for the guys to talk about their wounds?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the place where they can just talk with each other and say, you know what? It feels really hurtful when I get treated this way, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And of course, there are people like yourself that are doing. You do men's groups and men's
Mm-hmm.
retreats, I think. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I was thinking, well, that's interesting, because there are places, and I have a feeling. I don't talk to a lot of men about this, but I have a feeling that there are a lot of men who need a place to go to talk about these things, because societally, it's like you shouldn't be. You should just be sucking everything up, just like you've been doing for millions of years. Continue sucking it up.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I just wanted to open up that discussion with you.
Yeah. Well, it's a great discussion. I agree with what you're saying. I think in Western culture, maybe not in Europe, but certainly in the United States and Canada, I think men have been demonized and vilified, and for good reason. I mean, men have done a lot of
Sure,
bad
sure.
things, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so there's something that it had to happen. Um, but listen, masculinity is it has to be balanced, like between the masculine and the feminine. And I think the changing gender roles of the last however many years, 40 years, have left men feeling confused about their place in the world. Like, if I'm not here to provide and protect, what the fuck am I doing? Like, well, I don't like I that's my utility, that's my value, and so that's very, I think, confusing for most men. It's confusing for me, right? That's how I feel my purpose as a man is to provide and to protect my woman because she's more vulnerable than I am. And if she wants to have children, she's extraordinarily vulnerable. And then I have to provide for that child. And that there's a deep impulse inside me to want to do that, to want to give that. And in the absence of that, it's very confusing. And I think men can fall prey to, addiction or pornography or promiscuity, and then also to resentment and anger and a desire to withdraw, which is what you're seeing. And I think there's a lot of women that are, again, understandably angry, which is great. I believe I work with it all the time. Women come in and, they hit the block and they want to fucking kill men. And where it goes ultimately, if they want to heal, is that it has to go to the place where they got really hurt, and to feel the place where I needed a man, I needed my father, and he wasn't there for me. And that was devastating for me. And I don't want to admit that. It's too vulnerable to admit, to acknowledge like how much I needed men. And I think there's a lot of women out there who've been hurt by men, hurt by their father, that have cut off from that desire, that longing for the man. And so, and instead are kind of pushing away and punishing. Again, I understand why. And I think that leaves men feeling alienated and confused. And the way out, I believe, is for men to take responsibility for the things that they've done, for the ways that they've done harm, and to understand that all of that was motivated by generations of repression and fear and pain. And now that the culture is essentially out of survival mode, which we've been in since, human beings started, but we're kind of out of it. There's now space to feel and to examine ourselves, to go within. And I think that's happening. I mean, I'm obviously in contact. I have my own men's programs, but I'm in contact with lots of other people who are doing men's programs. And guys are getting together and they're talking about this stuff. And they are connecting with the places where they feel pain and hurt and confusion and anger. And it's something that I think they feel hesitant to talk about with women. And because I've done so many mixed groups and also men's groups, I see that men will not bring themselves fully in front of women, and not in that way, that they have to be with other men. That's the only place that they really feel safe. And so I'm happy that there seems to be, at least, from where I'm standing, a movement around this. And it's a conversation that's happening. I think the issue that I have is, I'm trying to reach the bros, right? I'm because I'm kind of a bro. And so a lot of people saw my interview with, Andrew Tate, and who's the bro of all bros. And I think that did something to people because, one, he was willing to sit down with me, which is interesting. It's an indication that he knows there's something going on inside him that he doesn't understand, and he's willing to, to engage in the dialogue. I mean, he resisted. I don't believe in therapy. This is all bullshit. But he talked to me for 2.5 hours. So, and he went somewhere. And so I think the fact that he did that, like people watch the interview and they see, how he is and all of that. And, oh, he's a narcissist. He's a bad guy. And maybe he is. I don't know. But all I know is, like, in that 2.5 hours, I found him to be extraordinarily vulnerable in the way that he could be. And I think
to his capacity. Yeah.
To his capacity. And he said it. I'm being as vulnerable as I can be. Like, he softened. And in the end, he gave over. I mean, if you watch the end, if you watch his body language, he surrenders. Finally, he let down something, even if it was just for a moment. And I was like, 2.5 hours. And he's like, finally, something real happened. And this beautiful moment, and we recognized it. Like, you know, he saw it, he knew what was happening, and I knew what was happening. We had it. And I thought that is extraordinary. And I really felt it was a zeitgeist moment. Like people are going to lose their fucking minds when they see this, and it's going to change things. And I do believe that it has, you know, because I see the comments on the YouTube video. Of course, there's a lot of like, therapy's gay, Tate's giving this guy therapy. There's a lot of that. But there's a lot of people who actually saw what happened, and they were really gratified to see even a moment of vulnerability. And so I think that permission is being given. I think there's a deeper understanding. I think it's really fucking scary to go there, to let down the guard. And I think there's a distortion around this idea of masculinity. Like, I can never show my feelings. I can't be weak in front of women. Vulnerability is weakness. Like all of that is of course a distortion. Masculinity is really about, am I able to be completely present here right now, conscious in every moment, and have access to all the aspects of me? Yes, my violence, yes, my aggression, but also my love and my compassion. Can that all be here in this package, you know, integrated and whole and present? That to me is the ultimate man.
I like that. I like that because I think about what I've come to is that when I hear people talk about toxic masculinity, I go like, well, what is that? You know, that's not masculinity. And then I come up with, well, I think it's repression. I think that's what's toxic.
Yeah.
Is the denial of the fullness of I guess, being.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. It's all, I mean, anything toxic is repression. It's shame. It's ultimately shame about our shame about our rage, as we've talked about, but also shame about our pain, our helplessness, particularly for men. It's like in the place where we're, because, you know, the psychopathic or the narcissistic illusion is that I'm in control. That's a safe place, right? And a lot of men have that, like, and the whole orientation of a lot of online men's, you know, more to the bro culture is like, you got to get things under control.
Yeah.
And bring order. And that, yes, and that's an illusion, bro. There's no, you don't have control over anything here, because like tomorrow something can happen. Like, God is in control. And so you have to balance this desire for, like, it's not really control, it's focus and purpose, but you also have to be in the flow. You have to be fluid, and you have to be able to be surrender to what is.
Yeah. I was thinking in the military, I mean, some of the best operators are not about being in control. They're about being adaptable.
That's right.
You know, everything's adapting to the battlefield. It's not about having complete and utter control. Yeah, at times, but there's curveballs all the time. There's shit that goes down, that there's shit that happens, and you have to just adapt all the time. And these are fucking manly men.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I actually think some of the, you know, one of the things, just to go back to Tate, because he's such an archetype, but it's not just him. It's a lot of different men. These kind of macho men, you know, the Jocko Willnicks and all of that. You know, yeah, they may not be vulnerable in the way that we think about it, right? Like getting in touch with your feelings, crying, you know, whatever that is. But they're vulnerable in the sense of they put themselves out there. They risk. They're willing to be seen. Going to war, that's vulnerable. You could get killed. I mean, you know, that's a real thing. You're facing danger. And so I think like we have to broaden the definition of vulnerability and actually see that a man who's walking down, you know, into a ring to fight another man at UFC, yes, he's all, you know, muscled up and in, you know, in his aggression, but he could also get his ass kicked in front of the world, get knocked out in front of his wife and kids. And so that act of fighting is extraordinarily vulnerable, but we don't recognize that. And I think it's important that we do.
I'm glad you said that. I never thought of that actually. I'd never thought of that as vulnerable. Interesting. You said at some point that you were guided by a certain something, a voice inside of you, kind of thing. And you've made some, huge shifts in your life, right? Like, what does that voice feel like? And that may not be the right word inside of you that urges you. This, this is what we're doing.
It's a great I don't know.
Hmm.
It's just I have an impulse, and for some reason I've always trusted it. I don't know why. Um, I mean, I had a few experiences early on, which I guess affirmed my instincts or my impulses, that voice. And I remember being in my mid-20s, struggling in Toronto as an actor, waiting tables, which is humiliating, not really getting anywhere, little, theater and commercials. But I had this very, very strong impulse. I said, it's going to take until you're almost 30 to make it, but you're going to make it. And that's exactly what happened. Now, maybe that was a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Mm-hmm.
but it felt like I needed that time to figure it out, to learn, to navigate the whole industry and myself in relationship to it. So I've had these experiences where things have worked out for me. But I will say that now what I do is when I have an intuition or an impulse about something regarding my life, for instance, moving to Mexico, which I did recently, I woke up one morning with this overwhelming feeling like we got to move to Mexico. And I said to my wife, like, I'm like, we're moving to Mexico. That's what's happening. And I knew she'd be down with it, because she's Spanish speaking and she loves Mexico. And she's up for an adventure. So she was like, okay. And then of course I contracted. I was like, what am I crazy? Why am I moving to Mexico? My mind got involved and I had a couple of days once we officially made the decision of intense fear. And, because it didn't really make sense. Why would we move to Mexico? And I didn't want to do it out of fear. Am I moving to Mexico because I feel like things that are going on in the United States are crazy? And is that why I'm getting out? Am I avoiding something? All my mind got involved. And then I said, okay, well, I'm going to ask for a sign. And every time, Mark, I've done this, every time I ask for a sign, and it's not for little things, it has to be like something big where I'm like, it's a big move that I'm going to make. And I'm like, oh my God, this is scary. I don't know. Am I crazy? I'm like, all right, God, like, show me. Every fucking time I get signs that are, overwhelming, not little weird coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's not my mind. It's not confirmation bias. These are things that, if I told you, you'd just be like, what the fuck? That
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And it just feels like God is speaking to me and just affirming. It's like, yeah, go. And I don't know what it's about. That's the other thing. You
Mm-hmm.
can't
Mm-hmm.
know. So somebody asked me, why are you moving to Mexico? I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm going to find out when I get there. I don't actually know. All I know is I have this impulse. It scares me sometimes. I ask for signs. If I ask for signs and I get them, I got to go. And that's what happened with my wife. She's like, are we crazy? I'm like, babe, it's not us. Like, God told us to go. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but in a sense, that's what it was. Like, we
Yeah.
got the signs, and I can't ask for them and get them and then not go. And so now we're
No,
here,
no.
and now we're loving it.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I feel similarly. Like I've done some insane things. I feel similarly. And I was thinking about, as I asked you about what's the voice like, um, because I was trying to answer it for myself. And for me, the voice, it's not really, it doesn't really speak, but it does. It says something, but it doesn't feel like it's entirely me. Like I don't stop
Yeah,
and go like, I thought that, like, where the fuck did that come from? Feeling that's kind of what it's like.
yeah,
And it's strong.
strong.
You said at one point you can tell I've listened to a lot of podcasts with you. You said at one point that you went to a party This was sometime after, getting out of the film industry. You went to a party and people said to you something like, oh, you got out, like amazing, you got out. And I was thinking about that, like, what the fuck? It's like you got out of prison, but you can leave prison anytime. Like, what is that? You got out. What is this thing that they feel?
Well, they can't get
Um,
out. They can't get out because they're famous now.
hmm,
I mean, I didn't
hmm,
have a degree of fame. I mean, it was a problem because when I started doing this work, most people knew me, as an actor, and then it was like, oh, he decided to become a life coach. That you can understand why that would be the narrative, right? Oh, failed actor turned life coach or whatever. That's not how I experienced it, of course, and I did a very very deep study, but I wasn't that famous. So I had a little bit of freedom. And I always wondered why. Again, it's like I got to Hollywood and I saw like, oh, this is what it means to be the lead on a 1 hour TV show. I was like, that sounds fucking ridiculous. Like, you got to work like 80 hours a week for what? And I always kind of stayed a little bit on the fringes. I did a lot of I mean, I worked and I had the lead on a couple of series, but they were sort of short lived and a lot of reoccurrings, and maybe that was just a function of my talent, but there was some way I kept asking myself, why are you not, really going for this? And I think there was some part of me that knew that I had another destiny. And if I got too famous, that was going to get in the way. So when I was at this party talking to people, and most of them were extraordinarily famous. They just, yeah, they were like, they said to me, you got out, man. Good for you, which surprised me. Right. I thought they were going to be like, oh, he couldn't cut it, couldn't make it,
mm,
oh,
mm.
sorry, it didn't work out for you. But I think once you're there, you're kind of trapped. And I think it's hard to get out. I think the ego takes a big hit. And it's very seductive. You're making a lot of money, you have a lot of prestige, you have a lot of status. And I saw it in so many people. Especially people who've been famous from a young age. There was almost a way they were just living on autopilot, and the scripts were coming in and they were going out on these auditions. But was there excitement? Was there thrill? Were they living at the edge of what it is that they want to do? I didn't see that, and I saw a lot of like neuroticism and fear and ego and narcissism and dissatisfaction. And it's almost a cult, really. I mean, Hollywood really is
Mm-hmm.
a cult.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting when I got out. Also, I got a few calls from people. Let's just say I don't want to even indicate who they might be, but who were struggling,
Yeah.
like with what was going on and
Yeah.
their relationship to what was happening, because they were getting sick or things were happening within the family. Like they realized that the environment they were in was toxic, and they seemed, or at least they projected onto me, there's somebody who got out and seems to have realized himself and is psychologically healthy, and I want that. And people were calling me like, and it was very gratifying, on one level, because I was terrified that that they thought I was some kind of weirdo, but also it was very sad, because these are good people. They're smart. Like most of the people that I met in Hollywood, and I know that you're in the industry, you can attest to it. Most of them are like extraordinary, like
Yes.
intelligent, creative, like
Yes.
brilliant, passionate, interesting, and that system is whew, it's it's very easy to get corrupted, and it's in subtle ways. And I know, because I was corrupted, I was seduced, and I went into it, and thankfully I got out. But it's real, man.
But how lucky are you that you got seduced? How lucky are you that you got to do that journey and be like, all right, this is not what I wanted. But
Yeah.
you went, that's amazing. I got a piece of advice, best piece of advice I ever got in my life that I ignored. My first few weeks in Hollywood, this is back in the early 90s. I went to a party. It was Oliver Stone's house. And I end up, because I'm a bit of a am a bit introverted, I end up in a room with another introvert, Denzel Washington, and like I'm like, holy shit, it's Denzel. So we start talking, and you know, I'm drinking, he's not drinking, and he says, so because he somebody tells him who I am, I of course know who he is, and he says to me, so what do you think? And I go, of what? He goes, all this Hollywood, and I start gushing about shit, and then he's quiet, and I go, why do you ask? And he goes, well, here's my advice. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. I did not pay attention. He had to be wrong. He had to be wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
He was right. He was absolutely
right.
He was right. Speaking of all the bullshit, one final question. Would you act again if the right project came, or are you not feeling it?
Maybe. I mean, I'm not closed off to it. If I got a call tomorrow and the script was really interesting and I felt that I could do something with it, or I felt it a yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you follow human design.
I've just started, because my wife's crazy about it. So I just started like looking into it because I'm fascinated.
It's really interesting. A woman that I work with, Angela, we do a lot of workshops together, and we do a podcast together. She's deep into human design, and my wife has learned a lot about it. But I'm what they call a manifesting generator, and I'm supposed to act from my sacral, which is a or mm-mm. There's a yes or a no, and it's instantaneous. And what I've been advised is that's all I have to know. I don't have to do anything else. I don't have to think. It's just yes or no, and then let that path continue to unfold, which is kind of a wonderful way to live. I don't have to think about anything. I'm faced with something, and it's just yes or no, and right immediately from my sacral. So if somebody brought me something and I felt a yes, I would pursue it. And if I felt a no, I would say no thanks.
Yeah, that's cool. I heard somebody talk about something called a 5-line. Is that part of human design?
Probably, yeah, 5-line. I've heard that, but I don't know that much.
My wife said to me, actually, this last night or this morning, she said, I think you're a 5-line. And I go, why do you say that? She says, because people either fucking love you or they fucking hate you. Like
people hate you?
On you. I go, they project shit on me. And I'm like,
wow.
Why? What is good? The amount of projection I get feels like just weird. And she says, I think it's this 5-line thing. I think that's what you are. I'm like, that's interesting. I don't know.
It's worth getting a reading. If you're interested, if you feel,
I don't have my exact time of birth.
Oh,
I'm still trying to find it.
Right. Well, they might be able to work. I don't know, but I was surprised. I mean, at first I was like, human design, I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy.
I feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. But then I got a reading and there's something going on there. And then when you understand the story of it and how it evolved and you look at all this, you're just like, what the fuck is this? Like it was channeled.
Know. It's weird because like my general feeling about, astrology and this kind of thing is like, okay, it's bullshit. The time I was born does not determine my fucking fate. But then I was thinking, okay, but there are archetypes of human beings. So what if this is just another framework for an archetype? Who cares what time you were born and whether that's related or not? But there are archetypes, and maybe you are one kind of or multiple kinds of archetypes. So in that way, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm open to the mystery. I mean, we don't really know what's going on here.
We don't know shit.
So maybe human design is, all of it astrology. Like I'm open to everything.
Yeah.
So, my wife is into all of it. Mayan, she's into the Mayan calendar.
Oh yeah.
It's a whole world. And so I'm surrounded by it. I mean, for me, I try to keep it grounded in the psychological and the kind of classic spirituality.
Yes.
But it's interesting that I'm surrounded by all these people who have a slightly different orientation.
It is.
Yeah.
David, thank you for an amazing conversation. I really, really appreciate it. It's a very cool discussion with you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And to my audience, please, for the love of God, stay curious.